just wait one more minute, just give anyone else last minute chance. All right, y'all give me the thumbs up, and when you're ready, we'll go ahead and start 2 minutes early. How's that? All right. First of all, I want to thank everyone for being here today. This is our first big press conference of the year. I always enjoy these because it gets to showcase the very hard and diligent work of so many men and women in the law enforcement community who are working overtime to keep our state safe from those elements that are coming inside of it. Today, we are here to announce a major drug trafficking ring bust in a case that we have called Las Señoritas. This case is basically involves 170 charges against 43 defendants, which is now an unsealed investigation that came out of the state grand jury. I want to thank a number of people who are here today who were involved in this investigation. Obviously, we could never do anything without our partnership with SLED. I'm always honored to stand next to Chief Mark Keel. We have other agencies involved were the Department of Corrections, Greenville County Multi-Jurisdictional Drug Unit was involved in this case, the 13th Circuit Solicitor's Office, Anderson County Sheriff's Office, the Greenville County Sheriff's Office, Lawrence County Sheriff's Office, the Pickens County Sheriff's Office, Abbeville Sheriff's Office, Oconee Sheriff's Office, Spartanburg County Sheriff's Office, Easley Police Department, Clemson Police Department, Easley Police Department, and the Travelers Rest Police Department. There's obviously a multi-jurisdiction investigation going on here with state and local authorities across multiple counties. Like the last one we did, Los Bandidos, which involved an upstate Mexican restaurant that was trafficking in drugs. This is a very similar narrative. What you have here is you have lots and lots of methamphetamines coming across the border through Atlanta as a hub and into the upstate of South Carolina. This drugs is originating with drug cartels. The reason that we call this Las Señoritas is because it involves, obviously, there were 4 primary female defendants in this case who were literally in bed with the cartels in Mexico. Some of them have absconded and gone to Mexico. One was married to one of the cartel members, but they were working with inmates currently residing in the Department of Corrections who are able to, through command and control and the use of cell phones, to support and facilitate this drug trafficking ring. This case alone, we were able to identify 25 kilos of methamphetamine, which were seized, which has a street value of approximately $800,000, as well as about 30 firearms. Again, we've had 4 state grand jury cases in the last several years that involved the members of the Department of Corrections, inmates of the Department of Corrections, working with people on the outside to facilitate major drug trafficking rings. This is the second case in over a year that involves the state grand jury under basically finding cartel drugs coming from the southern border into the state of South Carolina and into the upstate. I do want to thank again Chief Keel, who is with me today. We have Greenville Sheriff Hobart Lewis. We have representing Sheriff Rick Clark. We have Brett Barwick. And the 13th Circuit Solicitor's Office has a Deputy Solicitor, Andrew Colbreth, who is also helping to prosecute and investigate this case. Andrew, where are you? Right, standing in the very back. I also want to identify that we have Creighton Waters, who is the Chief Prosecutor in the grand jury, and we also have Savannah Gowd, who is the lead prosecutor on this case. I always like to give a shout out to members of our staff. And let's see, I have one other person I had on here. Where's Mr. Cito? Oh, right behind me. One of our interns was instrumental in helping us working with our prosecutors and work this case. So I want to give a shout out to the members of our team here today who made that possible. One thing that I want to drive home is that we continually keep going back to the same problem where cell phones being used in prisons are facilitating and aiding the drug trafficking into the state of South Carolina. We have been barking about this for a number of years, but I don't think there's anyone in the state of South Carolina who has barked any louder than our director of the Department of Corrections, Brian Sterling. And so I wanted to give him an opportunity to come up here and talk about this case from his perspective at the Department of Corrections, as well as the issues that are enabling this type of conduct to continue.
Thank you, General. Chief Heel. Thank you. Good morning. Happy New Year. Brian Sterling, Director of Department of Corrections. First, I want to thank the men and women that stand behind me that worked on this case for a very long time to get to this result. I've stood behind you or in front of you before and talked about this issue at this very podium. I saw a glimmer of hope about a year and a half ago. We've called on the FCC to allow us to jam cell phones. Federal prisons can jam. States cannot. That makes absolutely zero sense to me. I was in charge of a committee, head of a committee of other corrections directors from across the country, facilitated by the FCC. We met with the industry. They came to us and said, maybe we have a solution. And the solution was that we can identify these phones through technology, and we can get the MZ number, IMEI number. If you type in your phone *#06#, that number will come up. We can identify that number, we can identify where it's located in a prison yard, and then we can turn that over to the industry, and within 5 days, they will turn it off. Jennifer Worthenthal from the FCC, the new chairwoman, passed that in July of 2021. Here we sit, and there's been no other action taken. We were the first state to get certified in this process. We have 5 companies out there who are ready to go, ready to do it. We have a system at Lee Correctional right now that will work. We could have these phones shut down in 5 days, and again, they're dragging their feet. I don't know why. I have my suspicion the industry is putting pressure on them not to allow this. But we will see. I'm calling on them to expedite this process. I sent a tweet out on New Year's Day saying, please expedite this process. We're seeing people that are incarcerated continue their criminal ways from behind bars. We have folks who are on the street who are convicted for doing this very thing. They come to prison and they continue to do this very thing. Prisons are supposed to make society safer, supposed to turn people's lives around. But with these cell phones and what they're doing with them, that is just not available right now. And there is the technology that can work. There's this new ruling that they passed that we want them to pass. We want them to expedite this and get this done as soon as possible. Literally, people's lives are at risk with this ongoing problem, prison cell phones. And just so if anybody asks, this is not just a South Carolina problem. This is a nationwide problem. Every prison system, county jails are having this issue where people are being convicted or pled guilty, come to prison, and they continue their ways as we see today. We had the largest RICO case in state history run out of a prison. We have this, and the Attorney General mentioned 3 or 4 other cases. So please, FCC, please pass this. Please change this. Please make society safer. It makes no sense to me that there's a simple thing out there that is safe and effective to make society safer, less victims, less crime, and they just refuse to do it. Thank you very much, General.
Thank you, Director Sterling. And like I said, you've been a huge national leader on this issue, and it's one that we have weighed in onto here in the Attorney General's office. Again, there were 43 defendants in this case. 34 of them have been arrested. Of those 34, 23 have been denied bond. 7 that we understand have fled to Mexico. But at the end of the day, we have busted up this drug ring because of the work of many of the people, all of the people and the agencies that they represent. I can't mention every name up here. It's just too many. But the point is it's the partnership and the collaboration with state and local officials, and at times even with our federal partners when needed, that enables us to effectively combat this. I want to echo this. Fentanyl and meth are pouring over from Mexican cartels into the southern region through Atlanta and into the upstate at an alarming rate. And this is specifically a meth case. We've seized $800,000 worth of methamphetamine. That is significant. But there's tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of other types of drugs and illicit activity occurring in the state because of this. So I want to thank all of the men and women that are part of this multi-jurisdictional group that stands up here today from the state down to the local level. We could not do this without their support. Again, I want to thank SLED, the local sheriff's offices in the upstate, the local police departments. Again, without their input and the solicitor's office, we would not be able to have this type of success. Now, at this time, I'm happy to entertain any questions you might have.
I do have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
visitors to the inmates bringing it in? Like, what is that process like?
There are a number of ways they're coming in. I'm happy to let the director give you his input, but from my understanding is we've seen them being smuggled in through, obviously the vendors that are being used at the prisons. We've seen them being dropped in by drones. There's a number of ways they get smuggled in or dropped in. Brian, do you want to address that?
Sure. Any way you can think of, they have 24/7, 365 to think of ways to get it in. But the biggest thing is they use the cell phone they have to coordinate the deliveries, as the general said, of drone drops, staff. You've reported on corrupt staff, corrupt vendors, visitors. We have seen a decrease in the number of cell phones that we found. We were the first, I think we may be the only one, if you've gone through an airport lately, TSA, you go through a scanner. We've implemented those scanners, I think some of y'all have covered that, which are full body scanners, so we can see if people are smuggling it in. But, all it takes is one corrupt staff member, that one person at the front door. They've got the key to the whole place, and if they're on the take, you can walk right in with as much as you want. But we are seeing a significant increase in drone attacks. I sent a tweet out over Christmas where we busted some people trying to smuggle in some drones at McCormick Correctional, and they can be several miles away. We are in the process of implementing something that we think will help slow that down and catch these folks and identify where they are. For security reasons, I'm not going to get too far into that. But again, if we could turn these phones off, they cost $3,500 per phone right now, so it's a lot of money. Turn these phones off, and this would have a significant impact on smuggling. It'll never stop. Before cell phones, we saw stuff being smuggled into prisons. But any way you can think of stuff coming in, it's coming in.
So whether you're a member of the drug cartel south of the border, or you're a facilitator of drug trafficking here in the state of South Carolina, or you're a small-time drug dealer, enough's enough. Look up here. There's an army of people coming for you. So I want to close with this. I want to thank everyone who is here today. We're incredibly proud of the efforts of those in law enforcement and the partner agencies we have in various regions of the state. Again, without them, we wouldn't have this success. So I want to thank them again. Any final questions before we go?
Yeah, my question was, why in particular the upstate, and then as much as you guys can reveal, how did you guys kind of realize, hey, these guys are targeting different places? You mentioned all the different jurisdictions. How did you guys finally bring it to a conclusion?
Well, I'll answer the first part of that, and if Savannah or anyone from one of the agencies wants to opine, or Creighton wants to opine. Obviously, when you look at Atlanta is a major national hub, especially in the southeast region, for drugs coming in across the border, on the Mexican border. But because of I-85 as a main corridor into our state between Atlanta and Charlotte, you're going to see a lot of drug. It's just easy. It's just easy, and it's convenient, and it's geographically situated close to that national hub. It's a major hub for drug trafficking as well as other types of trafficking. So that's why you're going to see it. That's not to say that it's not happening in other areas of the state, and there's certainly other veins that run through our arteries in our state that support that type of illicit activity. But that's why I believe we're seeing a lot of it in the upstate. Does anyone have anything to add to that? Okay. Yeah, Creighton, go ahead.
Creighton Waters with the state grand jury, and again I want to thank Chief Keel and all the officers up here for the excellent work in this particular case. And again, this is a prime example of how the state grand jury functions best. And you asked how you get all these agencies together, and the state grand jury is the glue that does that. That's what the state grand jury does, is instead of looking at individual drug cases as a one-off, what the great work of the narcotics officers of all the agencies up here do is start to try to figure out how are they all related, and then let's attack the problem as a whole, because that's really the only way that you can make a difference and undermine an organization. So that's what they're trying to do here. The general's exactly correct. If you want to know where your meth and your fentanyl is coming into South Carolina, it's coming from Mexican cartels, it's coming over the southern border, and it's coming typically through Atlanta. And of course, that's true. There's a geographical proximity there. In this particular case, it is a long history of related cases that started with a state grand jury case Graceland, moved on to state grand jury case Prison Empire, and now we have state grand jury case Las Senoritas. And some of these individuals have been indicted in multiple cases, including, if you see on the list that you would have gotten, The McCoy brothers, they, at least are serving time for drug trafficking going back to a state grand jury case, family tradition. But yet they continue to traffic drugs within the prison. And now we have these individuals, the senoritas, who have fled to Mexico. And they have these connections primarily with drug traffickers, native South Carolinians in the upstate. And so that's why you see the primary effect there. But the problem of methamphetamine and fentanyl use, as you're aware, is statewide.
Any discussion about weapons that was also seized along with those drugs?
There's a reason why the legislature has defined drug trafficking as a violent crime. Some people will say that drug use is a victimless crime. Those of us up here know that it is not, for two reasons. We know the effect that methamphetamine, and particularly fentanyl as well, is having on our communities. But more importantly, it's rare to ever see trafficking weight drugs and firearms are not in close proximity, because you can't go to Chief Keel and say, hey, my customer didn't pay me for my meth. You can't go to the sheriff and say, hey, I got ripped off on this meth deal. You can't do that. So the only way for traffickers to enforce their business is through violence and the threat of violence. And that is why it is, we always seize large amounts of firearms. It's rare to see that trafficking without the threat of violence, and many times violence as well. I want to talk a little bit about how the drugs get into the prisons, and we've had other cases like that, like the cash cow case, yard work case, we've seen, and the director and his staff have done a great job at trying to reduce this. But not only do we have corrupt staff, we had throwovers. We've had instances where items are smuggled onto prison yards, and then people who have trustee status are able to get those. We even had in Cash Cow, right through that door right there, there's a hallway, and behind there are trash cans. And there was actually cell phones and narcotics being smuggled into those trash cans and then picked up by inmates who were working on the State House grounds. So as the director said, when you have individuals 24/7, all they have to do is think about how to get things into the prison. It's a very lucrative market. There's a huge economy within the prison, and it's driven by these cell phones. You take those cell phones away, the ability of a cell phone to get payment through, WhatsApp or Cash App and things like that, 90% of it goes away immediately. And I echo what the general said and what Director Sterling said. It just makes no sense that this problem can't be materially addressed really with the wave of a wand, and allowing the state institutions to turn these phones off and make it that much more harder for these inmates to run these organizations. They can't do it. They can't run the money. They can't run the dope without the cell phone the way that they are now.
What is the reason behind why this ruling is not taking place yet? Any clarification on that?
I'll turn that to Director Sterling.
Well, first of all, the industry is against jamming. They've got lobbyists in D.C., and they work hard to shut this down, so that's been a no-go. I want to compliment our congressional delegation, most of whom have signed off on the Cell Phone Jamming Act. Senator Cotton of Arkansas has been all over this also, but they didn't want to do it, so the FCC finally, hearing from Congress, said y'all have to act. But I would inquire, and we can get you their immediate number, and you can call them today and ask them why they have not moved on this. I'm at a loss. It's a very good question, but I wish I had an answer.
Again,
Yeah, just one last
Thank you.
clarification question. Of the people that were arrested, were these all South Carolina residents? How many people were from Mexico, and if any did get
I think
arrested?
all were South Carolina residents. Several of them were actually, I think at least one of the females was married to a member of the cartel, but at least 7 have actually gone to Mexico. So yes, they were all South Carolina residents, with some with relationships or were actually married to members of the cartel. Just to kind of follow on what Creighton mentioned a minute ago, people think about drugs and they separate that from violence. Drug trafficking and violence are not distant cousins, they're twin siblings. They go hand in glove together. And I can't underscore enough, you look at the poison of fentanyl and meth that are coming across the border, coming into our state, and feeding through the pipelines of the I-85 corridor through Atlanta and throughout the entire state. It's a real problem in our state. The fact that inmates in the South Carolina Department of Corrections can be a part of this, through the command and control, the facilitation of the drug trafficking, is abhorrent. We need people in Washington, D.C. to cut that off through reform and regulations of the FCC. We need to continue working together. One of the things I also wanted to say, just for people out there who don't understand why the state grand jury, you know, you look at the sheriff of Greenville, Sheriff Lewis. He's got to stop at the county line when he's investigating a drug trafficking ring. Sheriff Clark has to stop at his county line. Solicitor Wilkins or Deputy Solicitor Colbreth, they have to stop at the edge of the 13th Circuit solicitor 13th Circuit jurisdictional. They can't go outside those circuits. Agencies like SLED and the Attorney General's Office through the state grand jury, we can basically work with jurisdictions in multiple parts of the state in one investigation, as opposed to doing kind of stovepiped investigations. It allows us to put all of these various jurisdictions together instead of having to prosecute one component of it in Greenville, another component of it in Spartanburg, another component of it in, you know, another area of the state. We can do it all at one time. So the state grand jury truly is the hub. With the aid of SLED, it is the hub of the ability to synchronize and collaborate in a way that allows us to be a lot more effective and a lot more efficient in combating drug trafficking in our state.
I have just one final question, and that is, what type of time would these individuals be serving? What could they be facing?
Hundreds of years? Hundreds of years.
Mandatory minimums of 25.
Yeah. We have sought, or we have noticed some of the inmates who were facilitating this from the inside. They have been noticed that we're seeking life without parole for those that are already in prison. So we're taking this very seriously, and if the people out there that are working with those on the inside and those on the inside don't take this seriously, you'll find yourself at the wrong end, at the business end of justice. So we look forward to seeing them in court. With that being said, oh yes.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. I noticed the indictment mentions the Jalisco New Generation cartel. Are there any organized prison gangs that were involved with this that you're able to name at this point?
Are we able to go into that?
I would just say always.
So I'm always careful when you're dealing with a state grand jury investigation. It's always ongoing up until the trial, and there could be things that I can't talk about. And so the general answer, I've just been advised, always. Gangs are always a component of this process, and so that is definitely a factor. All right. Thank you all for being here today. This concludes the press conference. Great job, man. Appreciate your team.